Pleasant day, learners. Welcome to our discussion on Geography Paper 2 for the June examinations. We understand our June examinations. We haven't covered a full paper for Paper 2. We haven't covered the economic geography party. So the paper is basically based on settlement studies and is divided into two, rural settlements and urban settlements, to make a total of 60 marks for each section. And the third question, as usual, geographical skills and techniques, which is our Memo. So we are going to go through the paper and we are going to discuss the questions and try to highlight some of the possible responses and try to give justifications as to why we are advocating for such responses. All right, so moving on with our questions, we are going to question number 1.11. The question is saying, a piece of land occupied by settlement is known as. Right, we are looking at a piece of land over which a settlement is located. That is the site of a settlement. When we are looking at the exact land over which a settlement is established, that is a settlement site. A situation we are looking at the location of a settlement in relation to the surrounding environment. So our response is A. Is B for the first question. Right, moving on to the next question. A settlement developed on a higher lying area because water is a threat. Where water is a threat, we tend to establish settlements on high-lying grounds, which we regard as dry point settlements. Right, moving on to the next question. Physical factors that determine the choice of a site. Now, looking at physical factors, we're looking at natural factors. We can advocate for flatland, and we can also advocate for soil fertility as a physical factor. The slope aspect also qualifies as a physical factor. We're trying to highlight on the most important factors that determine the location of a settlement here, which are natural or physical. So we opt for item 1 and item 3, which is giving us a response at C. Right, we move on to the following question. The position of a settlement in relation to its broader environment, like what we've discussed earlier on, that is the situation of a site. When we're looking at the relationship of a settlement to its surroundings, then we have number 115. A type of settlement represented below is, right, we are seeing that there is a settlement here, and there is a river here just close to the settlement. So what kind of settlement is this one? Automatically, it means that settlement was established for the need to access water from the river. So the correct response is that settlement is a wet point settlement. All right, we move on. A settlement pattern A is dash, and an advantage of settlement B is. But if you look at settlement A, you can see that the homesteads are closer to each other. And if we look at B, it's an isolated farmstead or an isolated, a dispersed farmstead. So we want to identify the pattern at A. We only have two patterns, nucleated or dispersed. So this one is nucleated for the sake that the houses are close to each other. From what we are seeing there, it's a nucleated settlement. And the advantage of the isolated settlement is definitely higher profits. The farmer does business or does farming on their own without interference of the other people, and also they have a larger piece of land without sharing of equipment and machinery. So they make huge profits from the farming activities. So the correct combination there is item 2 and item 3, which are on response number B. The settlement represented below is classified as a rural settlement due to what makes this one qualify to be a rural settlement. The key factor that we consider when grouping settlements according to rural or urban, we look at the functions and also we look at the complexity of the settlement. So here is a rural settlement because of the function. If you check there, the main function, you can see that is primary activities of farming. So primary activities, we know they dominate in the rural areas. Right, moving on to number 1.2, study the diagram below based on the shapes and patterns of rural settlements. Choose the correct letter A to D. From the diagram, write down the letter, write only the letter A to D next to the question. Right, so number 1.2, large flatlands makes mechanization possible in this settlement. We want to identify a settlement with large flatland where you can use machinery. If you check on A here, they have large pieces of land and the land is flat. So it's A. This pattern is associated with traveling long distances for goods and services. Also want to check where do people travel long distances to acquire goods and services, right? If we try also to check, you tend to find that because of isolation at A, people have no access to basic services. They have to travel from their isolated farmsteads to get to a point where they acquire services. So A is also correct response for number 1, 2, 2. Right, going on to number 1, 2, 3, the location of a settlement is influenced by slope aspect. Slope aspect, we are looking at the direction which is faced by a slope. We know well that in the southern hemisphere, settlements which are not facing to the north, they are the ones that are receiving more insolation and are more favorable for the location and establishment of settlements. So if you try to look at apply slope aspect, if we check at C here, we are seeing that this contour line is showing 740 meters and we have 760 meters, which means this area is down sloping going towards this direction and is sloping towards the northern direction, is facing towards the north. So because of slope aspect effect, we qualify C as the correct response. This settlement developed around a water source. It's clear. If you check settlement D, this is an indication of a water source and the settlement is developed around that point. This one is C and this one is D. The shape of the settlement is influenced by the road. Where do we have the road influencing the settlement? If we check settlement B, you can see that the settlements are influenced by this road here. The road is going in this direction and the settlements are also going in the same direction as the road. So the correct response for number 125 is B. Then a nucleated settlement with a round shape. A round shape, we've seen it already. Nucleated and with a round shape is at D. Then a dry point settlement. A dry point settlement, we are looking at a settlement which is established away from water for the risk of flooding. If you check settlement B is located further away from the river here. So it's a dry point settlement. A settlement that receives direct sunlight, like what we talked about slope aspect, it's C. Right, we move on to the next question. It's based on the infographic on rural depopulation. Right, then it says here, define the concept of rural depopulation. When we're talking of depopulation, what you must understand here, we are talking of decrease in the population. That is to depopulate, to decrease in the size of population or in the number of people. So rural depopulation is basically a decrease in the number of people staying in the rural areas. A decline in the numbers of people staying in rural areas, that is rural depopulation. Refer to the infographic and indicate the trend in the population size in rural areas from 2020 to 2023. If we check here, 2020, our graph is here, and in 2023, our graph is there. These are our years, and these are our figures or statistics of the numbers of people. So what's the trend there? The trend is decreasing. The numbers are decreasing. From 2020 to 2023, the numbers of people staying in rural areas is decreasing. According to the infographic, what can be the reason for rural depopulation? Why are people living in rural areas? Why is the number of people in rural areas declining? According to the infographic, what could be? But if you try to analyze the infographic, we want to try and identify if there's a possible reason that could be a cause for rural depopulation. All right, if we check here, we see the nature of the land which is portrayed here. In geography, if we present correct land, it means that land doesn't have any moisture. It has been dry for long. That is one indication of why people are moving away from rural areas. And also, maybe if we try to check on productivity on the farms, we can try to figure out the nature of what is happening in the fields here. It shows that there is barely nothing productive happening in those fields. So by mere looking at those factors, we can try to qualify them as the causes or the reasons behind rural depopulation. So we can say, we can talk of drought as one factor. Because of persistent droughts in the rural areas, people are no longer interested in staying in the rural areas. Or we can qualify it as climate change. Is a possible factor. Or we can say poor yields. Those could be the factors that could be promoting rural depopulation. Because of droughts, persistent droughts, or because of climate change, or because of poor yields. Those are factors that can be contributing towards rural depopulation. Explain why the young person in the infographic is looking sad. We are analyzing the facial expression of this young man on the illustration on the infographic here. If we can see what is happening to him, you can actually see that things are not going well. He is actually looking very sad. He is not even happy with the situation from the look of things. So explain why the young person in the infographic is sad. What might be causing the sadness in that young boy? Right, one most definite reason here is family separation. We know well that it is mostly the productive people who move from the rural areas going to cities and towns to try and find job opportunities, leaving the elderly and the young ones. So in this situation, we are assuming that this boy's parents are still active and they have left him in the rural areas, maybe with an old granny or with an old grandfather to fend for him. And they have tried to find a way of life in the urban area. That is going to give him sadness because his family is split and is separated because of the effect of people moving away from rural areas going to cities and towns. That might not be the only reason. We can also justify that he is said because of loss of productive livelihood. The way of life, which was more productive through agriculture, is now lost because now there are persistent droughts. Chances of the farmer getting sufficient yields is now limited because of the persistent droughts and because of climate change. That is also a very worrisome factor. You rely on the land, you rely on agriculture to sustain, to find food. But now the lands are no longer productive because of the effect of climate change or because of the effect of persistent droughts. Then that is a worrisome effect to people in the rural areas. That might also be a reason why that young men look so worried. Right. Besides that, there are other reasons that you can also try to factor out, which qualify to be the cause of the sadness in that young man. Right. Moving on to the next question. In a paragraph of approximately 8 lines, explain how rural depopulation will negatively impact the economic development of rural areas. We want to look at the effect of rural depopulation on the economy of rural areas. Right. Most definitely here, we are going to have reduced labor supply. We know well that the productive labor force is the one that migrates to urban areas. And on the rural areas, there is reduced labor supply that is going to cause stagnation of the economy. The economy is not going to grow, it's going to be stagnant because it no longer has productive labor force. People who are supposed to be working on the fields are no longer there. And then who is going to work on the fields? The economy is going to be stagnant for that reason. Then we can also look at the effects like reduced productivity. The rural economy will be faced with reduced productivity. For the same reason that they've lost the productive workforce, the people who are left behind are usually the young and the elderly, who are not very physically strong to do manual work required on the farms and on the fields. And at the end, they are less productive. And the overall result on the rural economy is there's reduced productivity in the rural economies. Then besides that, you can also look at reduction in income. The level of income also gets reduced. Reduction of income. Income is also going to get reduced since there's no more productive labor force and no more gainful employment. It also means the circulation of money in the economy is going to be low and the income level in the rural area is going to get reduced. Then we can also look at the development of ghost towns. The economy will be featured with ghost towns, abandoned buildings as people move to rural areas. And also we can talk of closure of services. Closure of services. For example, you can look at schools or clinics or shops. Remember the concept of threshold population. There is a minimum number of people who are supposed to support a service and make it viable and profitable. If the number falls below the minimum, then the service has no incentive to keep operating. The only option that remains for that particular service is to close down. So it also applies to rural economies. If the threshold population falls below, if the number of people in the rural areas falls below the minimum required to support those services, they have to close, which will imply that there will be further problems in the rural economy. Right, those are some of the highlights that you can use to answer that question. Right. I want to move to the next question. It's a question on land use. Right. Define the concept land use. Right. When we're talking of land use, when you're defining the concept, you must define it in geographical sense and not just to repeat the same words in the concept. Right. We are looking at, when we're looking at land use, we are looking at a specific function for which land is being utilized for. Land is used for different purposes or is designated for different functions. So the concept land use, we are saying, what is the land being used for? What is the major activity that is taking place in that particular geographical space? Are we doing crop farming? Are we doing animal husbandry? Are we doing forestry? Is it an area for mining? That is land use. We are looking at the specific designation or function which is being performed on a specific piece of land. Right, moving on to the next question. Identify the land use depicted in the picture. What kind of land use is being depicted here? We are seeing that is animal farming predominantly because you can see the number of animals around here. So predominantly this is a farming area, but the farming is mainly focused on we can say the main land use there is animal husbandry, the rearing of animals. We see there are sheep there, and also there are some cows, and most definitely maybe they are producing milk, and maybe they are also producing some products from the sheep. And we can see that's the nature of the farming which is taking place on that particular geographical space. All right, explain how rural-urban migration will negatively influence land use in rural areas. How will rural-urban migration influence land use? Right, what is going to happen there? Land use pattern will change. It's most definitely the land use pattern is going to change. Like, for example, some lands which were being used for farming, they will no longer be utilized for farming. Why? Because there are no longer people to offer the services or to offer the labor required to support the farming activities. So it is going to impact through change of land use pattern. The land use is going to change in that direction because of the productive people who would have left the rural areas. Or sometimes we can say formerly productive lands will lie idle. Some formerly productive lands, because now there are no longer people to do farming, they will lie idle, those lands. And that is going to impact on the land use in the rural areas. That is going to affect the land use in the rural areas. Or if you can check also on conservative methods that were being used, some of them are going to be abandoned. Like talk of some good agricultural practices which were being done when productive labor force was there. They're going to be abandoned, and that is going to affect also the land use. Some of the productive land use is going to be degraded because of that particular issue of rural-urban migration. Right, there are several other factors that you can discuss on that particular topic. Right, number 144, explain the importance of sustainable land use in rural areas. When you are looking at sustainability, sustainable land use, we are saying we must be worried when we're looking at sustainability. We are worried about the future generations. Whatever we do with the land today must not compromise the ability of the coming generation to also benefit equally from the same land. So in other ways, when we're talking of sustainability, we are worried about conservation and preservation of the available land and the available natural resources so that the future generations are also going to benefit equally the same as us who are using the land today. So when we're looking at sustainable land use in rural areas, why is it important? You can talk of the importance of it increases productivity, increased productivity. If we do sustainable agriculture, it's more productive. We end up having more yield. Or we can talk of it also assists in job creation. Some jobs are created while we are implementing sustainable measures to use our land. Also, it ensures soil conservation because we use methods which are environmentally friendly that do not harm the soil. So it conserves the soil. And you can also talk of water management. In terms of water management, we are saying sustainable land use, it prevents pollution. If we engage in sustainable measures, we also take care of our water resources and prevent polluting them. So those are some of the importances of the importance of land use, sustainable land use in the rural areas. Right, checking on the next question, suggest strategies to promote the sustainability of land use in rural areas. What strategies can we put in place to enhance sustainability of land use? Right, we can look at things like soil conservation measures. For example, terracing. We are reducing the rate of soil erosion by through terracing. That is going to conserve the soil. Or we can look at also organic farming. Instead of us using artificial fertilizers, we use our own natural fertilizers that are going to enhance soil structure and ensure guaranteed soil fertility. We can also talk of agroforestry. While we do agriculture, we also need to plant trees so that we reduce soil erosion and also we reduce land degradation. Then we can also look at other measures like crop rotation. We engage in sustainable farming through crop rotation. Right, those are some of the measures. We cannot exhaust all of them. I'll move on to the next question. It's an article, nearly 2 billion spent on failed land reform. Right, define the concept land reform. When you're defining this concept, you must address the basics. So our land reform, basically, we can say it's a policy or we can say it's a measure to change the way land is owned or used or and managed. So land reform is a concept, is a composite concept which entails other sub-concepts like land restitution, land redistribution, and land tenure. So we are trying to find ways of changing the land ownership policy. When we're looking at a reform, we are introducing some changes to land ownership and also to usage of land and also the management of land. That's basically our land reform. According to the article, identify a challenge associated with land reform. Right, we go to the extract. The challenge is here. Right, it says in Free State under various land reform distribution programs since 1994 at a cost of 1,881 billion to the taxpayers, and this land was not being used for commercial food production. That's the challenge. The government had spent so much money to acquire land and also redistribute the land, but the land is not being used for commercial food production. All right. Suggest possible reasons for the challenge identified in the question. What are the possible reasons for the challenges? Why are those farmers not utilizing the land for commercial production, or why are they not utilizing the land for the intended purposes? Right. You can talk of budgetary constraints. Right. We have problems with the budget on the side of the government and on the side of individuals. The government might not have enough money to fund the farmers to do productive farming, and hence they cannot use that land productively. And also we can talk of a lack of support of what we call post-settlement. Post-settlement support, we are saying if the farmers have been resettled, they have acquired the land through land reform, they must get support from the government. The government must still fund those farmers to do productive farming. Otherwise, the land will go into unproductive use because of lack of support. Then you can also look at some other factors like lack of education and skills. In as much as the farmers have got ownership of the land and control of the land, they need skills to do productive farming. If they do not have the right skills and the right set of education that will make them productive in terms of agricultural productivity, the land will still go into unproductive use for the very same reason of lack of education and lack of skills. Then we can also check on other factors like corruption. Some corrupt officials, they do not distribute the resources that are intended for the farmers. And the farmers will still be lagging in terms of productivity because of some corrupt officials who are not doing their job properly or who are benefiting from the state resources for their own sake and not for the sake of the state. Right. That besides those points, you can have other arguments that you can use to answer that question. We are not limiting the argument to only those responses. Any other reasonable response in the context of failure of land reform is also regarded as a correct response. Right. Identify the social challenge caused by land reform as mentioned in the article. Identify the social challenge that has been caused by land reform. But if we check there, the social challenge, we are saying, how is the society affected? On the last part, it says that it seemed as if the government was oblivious to the threat that it imposed, to the threat that it posed to food security in the country. So the threat that is going to happen there is there's going to be a threat to food security. The country will become food insecure because of a failed land reform. We are trying to redistribute land for the sake of improving productivity and ensuring food security. But we are seeing a situation whereby the land is going into unproductive use. That is going to cause a threat on the food security of the country, and we are going to end up having food insecurity for that reason. Right. Moving on to the last question. Suggest strategies to improve the land reform process in the country. What can be done to make sure that the land reform is effective and is productive enough as per plan? Right. The first thing, the government should deal with corruption. Issues of corruption must be dealt with strictly so that there is efficiency in terms of service delivery. And also, the government must try to source and attain a sufficient budget. The process needs money, and the government must acquire that money to make sure that it goes smoothly. Then also we need to improve government capacity. Sometimes the government advocates for things that it cannot manage. For example, the land reform, it requires the government to employ more people to do that process. Does the government have capacity? Does it have enough staff? That is also need to be taken care of. Then we need education and skills. The farmers need to be equipped with skills to do productive farming. Then we also, when talk of support, the government must offer support to the farmers. They also need infrastructural development. We need to develop infrastructure so that the resettled farmers have got access to basic infrastructure that will enable them to be productive enough. Right. So if we try to address some of those things, then that can help us attain a productive land reform. Then the following question is question number 2, which is on urban settlements. We're going to go through the questions. Minimum number of people needed to support a business, that is a threshold population. The next question. There are dash small urban settlements and dash large urban settlements in the hierarchy. If you look at a hierarchy, it has a wider base and it goes into a triangular shape. The higher we go, the higher up the hierarchy. So it has more small urban settlements and less. We have many towns and we have less metropolitans or conurbations. A continuous urban area, that is a conurbation. The theory that refers to the distribution, size, and density of urban areas, that is the theory of urban hierarchy. A maximum distance a customer is willing to travel to buy something, that is the range of goods. Expansion of urban areas into surrounding areas, that is urban sprawl. The following sketch is an example of, we are seeing here, there's a petrol station, there's an ATM, there's a pharmacy, there's a liquor shop, there's a butchery. All these commodities, we need them almost on a daily basis. They are lower order functions and services. Right, I'll move on to the next question, which shows a model of a setup of an urban area. Right, identify the urban development model depicted in the diagram. That is a multiple nuclei. Then F and E are not suitable to be placed next to each other. F, you see it's some sort of a heavy industry. E, this is predominantly a high income residential area. They're not compatible to be close to each other. Why? For the reason being, E is found far away from any pollution. Because you have industries, they cause high levels of pollution. We cannot have a high income residential area being compatible to a heavy industry. Examples of secondary business centers are CBDs, universities, and parks. And these give rise to rise to high income residential areas. The secondary business centers, they give rise to the development of high income areas, income residential areas. Right, moving on to the next question. Refer the diagram and answer the following questions. The dash was developed by, right, this model, the model of the multiple nuclei, which is all known as the Harrison-Ullman model. Right, this model was developed by Chauncey Harris and Edward Ullman in 1945. That is when they came out with the ideas of the designing of the multiple nuclei model after seeing the trends of the growth of cities in the developed world. All right, so our correct response is item 2 and item 4, which is B. Identify a key characteristics of the South African city. The South African city is featured by strict segregation of urban areas according to race. South African city was designed according to apartheid practices, and the government was practicing segregation. Right. Which of the following challenges is commonly associated with the South African city? The challenge of the South African city is socio-economic inequalities and spatial segregation. What was a feature of the spatial outcome of the South African city that continues in modern urban planning? Our cities of today, they are still having the same problem of the spatial outcome which was there in the South African city plan. What is the problem there? The growth of informal settlements outspacing urban settlements. Fragmented urban spaces with segregated informal settlements are associated with, is it a multiple nuclei or single nuclei, with centralization or segregation? Right, basically if we check, if it's fragmented, it has a multiple nuclei, and if it's having segregated informal, there's segregation there. So it's item 2 and item 4, which is D. Right, moving on to the next question. Define the term gentrification. That is a geographical term which relates to the process where wealthier people move to previously low income or working class neighborhoods. So we are saying with gentrification, it's a process whereby the rich people or the affluent people, they are moving to areas that were previously low income areas and also areas that were designed for the working class. So that's the process of gentrification. I'd give an example of gentrification from the picture. What example can we see that there's gentrification which is happening in the area? Right, the example that we see is here. The luxury counters is coming soon in the area. That resembles a facility of the affluent people or the high income people, but is being made to now be part of that community. So it's an indication that there's gentrification coming. There's gentrification which is also happening in that particular area. From the picture, identify an economic reason why urban renewal must take place. Right. From the picture, I want to identify an economic reason why urban renewal must take place. If we try to check the situation appears like we have informal traders. Like if we check, we have informal traders who are around. And also we have people who resemble like they are just wandering around and having nothing productive to do. So from that reason, an economic reason why gentrification too needs to happen is it needs to happen so that it creates jobs for the local people. Because it resembles that there are some people who have nothing to do productive there. So if gentrification happens, rich wealthier people join, then they can ultimately improve the conditions of the people by giving them jobs. And also can justify to improve living conditions. If wealthier people come into the area, they're going to improve living conditions. If people are informal traders, in most instances, they are earning very low. But if they are gainfully employed, they are formally employed, they are going to get better. So it is there also justified to improve the living conditions or the living standards of the people. Then distinguish between centripetal and centrifugal forces using a clearly labeled sketches. We want to use a sketch of our own to indicate the centripetal and the centrifugal factors. Right. We are looking at the centripetal and the centrifugal factors. We relate them to commercial decentralization from the CBD. So we are saying if you have the CBD, centrifugal factors and centripetal factors. Right. Centripetal, they attract activities into the CBD, the centripetal. And the centrifugal, they repel activities from the CBD. What are the likely activities or events that are likely to repel activities from the CBD into the outlying business district? We look at things like crime. We look at things like congestion. We look at things like limited space. Things like competition. Those are things that repel activities from the CBD to the outlying business district. Then the centripetal, we look at things like prestigious location for prestigious reasons. A business locates in the CBD because of the prestigious value associated with the CBD. So for that reason, it's attracted. Then you also have other things like functional magnetism, whereby a business is attracted by some other functions in the CBD, which is related to the nature of its own business. So if we look at those things, those are some of the things that relate to the centrifugal and the centripetal forces. All right. Checking on the next question, predict um, predict what could happen to the city center if decentralization continues. What is likely to happen to the city center if more activities are moved out of the CBD to the outlying business district? Right, there's going to be reduced activity. Because more some functions are moving out, it also means a few of the activities are remaining. So the total activity is going to get reduced. And also, we are also going to get reduced traffic congestion. Because the volumes of people traveling into the CBD will be reduced. And also, we are going to have a cleaner environment. Which is a positive. There's going to be less competition. And you can also look at other positive aspects like less crime. Those are some of the things that are likely to happen in the CBD if there's continued decentralization. Right, moving on to the next question, evaluate the success of urban renewal in South Africa. Is the government succeeding in enhancing urban renewal in the cities of South Africa? How successful is it? We need to do an evaluation. Right, so when you're doing an evaluation, you can check on the side of the positives, and also I can check on the side of the negatives. On the side of the positives, is it a success? We have improved infrastructure. For example, we can talk of the roads. Then we can also talk of economic growth. There's now more activity in the CBDs or in the urban core centers, and also the issue of housing opportunities because of renewal. The government has afforded to create more housing opportunities in the cities. Then we also need to evaluate on the negatives. Is it successful? But we check on other things like inequality. It has caused great inequality in the society, and also can look at sustainability. Is it sustainable? Is it going to last? Are those buildings going to be maintained, or they are still going to go back to their old dilapidated state because of lack of maintenance? So we need to check also on issues like sustainability concerns. Is that going to last? Inequality. People who are supposed to benefit, they did not benefit from urban renewal. There are people staying in informal settlements who could also have benefited, but they are not benefiting anyhow from the whole process. And moving on to the next question, define the term informal settlement. When something is informal, when we're looking at informal as in terms of a settlement, we are looking at that kind of settlement which is illegal and which is unplanned. And what is it made up of? Cheap, weak building material. What we commonly refer to as the shandy town. That's an informal settlement. So the effect here is the settlement was not planned for, and the responsible authorities did not authorize for the establishment of that settlement. That is why we are saying it's illegal. People occupy land illegally out of their own will and establish a settlement without the authorities' approval. That's an informal settlement. And for the same reason, those people cannot build proper structures. They just use cheap material, which is also weak, like plastic material, like zinc material, to make their own shacks and settle. Quote a factor from the passage that gave rise to the rapid growth of Joe's law for informal settlement. We find it too from the extract. It says it was founded in the early 1980s in Cape Town's oldest African township, Langa. Its relatively good location in terms of transport and employment opportunities made it one of the fastest growing informal settlements. Because for this reason, it has a good location in terms of transport and employment opportunities. That is why it is having a rapid growth, a rapid growth. Explain the importance of social development in an informal settlement. Like Joe Slovo, why should we engage in social development? Try to improve ways of life of people in the informal settlement. It enhances access to basic services. The basic services which are required for human survival. Then you can also look at, it's important because it assists in job creation. Then you can also argue that it helps in upgrading housing. Explain the advantage of bottom-up policy for development of informal settlement. Bottom-up are looking at a development approach that starts from the people in the informal settlement to the authorities, not the authorities imposing on the people, but the people coming out with ideas and putting forward ideas to the authorities. Why is it important? All right, we can argue that as number 124, it assists. The first one is relevant in the sense that it helps in meeting specific needs. The people are the one who highlight the needs, their specific needs. So it's relevant in the sense that instead of the authorities imposing on the people, it's the people who decide on their specific needs. They know their problems and they know very well what must be done to address their problems. So it's relevant in that sense. And also it encourages transparency. The operation through bottom-top approach is transparent. And also we can say it assists in increased ownership. Since it's the people who are deciding for themselves, they also uphold a sense of ownership. And also can talk of better maintenance. The people will be responsible for the maintenance of whatever is developed in their areas because it's them who advocated for those developments. So they have to take care of the very same developments, for they know that they are the ones who are benefiting from that very developmental process which has been implemented in their areas of residence. Right, I'll move on to number 2, 4, 5. In a paragraph of approximately 8 lines, evaluate the impact of rapid expansion of informal settlements on the environment. Right, we want to look at what is going to happen with the environment because of the expansion of informal settlements. I will just highlight there are so many environmental impacts that can happen there. We can look at things like increased pollution. The environment is polluted, increased pollution. This comes in the form of water and also land pollution. There's increased pollution because of And we can also talk of disruption of ecosystems. As people invade new places, they also disrupt the ecosystems. And also we can talk of loss of natural habitat because of the expansion into the habitats for the need of land to establish the informal settlements. Then we can also talk of other aspects like the problem of soil erosion is also exacerbated by continued expansion of informal settlements. Then we can also look at increased risk of flooding. Other aspects like loss of biodiversity. Those are some of the impacts, mainly on the natural environment. Right. That takes us to the next question. Economic injustice in urban areas in South Africa. Right. Explain what is meant by the term economic injustice. Whenever we're talking about an injustice, remember, we're talking of something being done unfairly. It's unfair or it's discriminatory. A discriminatory practice with the economic system. And what does it lead to? Leading to unequal distribution. Of resources. That is basically economic injustice. When we are looking at injustice, we are looking at unfair practices or discriminatory practices. And those discriminatory practices, with their economic, they are within the economic nature of the working of the economy. And the result is that they are going to lead to a situation of unfairness in the distribution of the available resources. Things like unemployment, that is an injustice. It's a socio-economic injustice. If someone is unemployed, is being discriminated against the opportunity of getting a job and also a basic right to have a decent life. So that is part of an economic injustice in the urban areas. Things like social injustices in the rural areas, for example, like poverty, it's an injustice issue, which is typically associated with people in the rural areas. People must have a basic life, must attain a basic life. But if someone is absolutely poor, then they are exposed to a form of injustice. Right. That takes us to the next question. Calculate the difference in the unemployment rate between 2015 and 2020. We need to ascertain the difference in unemployment rate, which means we must find the rate for 2015 and from 2020. If we check here, our graph is basically from 30 to 32, and our marking here is approximately halfway by estimation here. We can conclude that around here might be 31 slightly. Then by 2015, it's 26. So using those figures, we can say our unemployment was 31% in 2020 and less 26, which gives us a difference of 4%. So that is the difference in the unemployment rate between 2020 and the year 2015. Identify two possible reasons why the unemployment rate increased from 2015 to 2020. Right, we are trying to check on the possible reasons why unemployment was on the rise. What made unemployment increase? Right, one of the most obvious reasons is slow economic growth. There has been slow economic growth, which has also facilitated the unemployment rate. And also, if we check in 2020, we had the pandemic of COVID-19. It was also a contributing factor that led to unemployment figures rising sharply in 2020. It was also a basic problem. And also, we can look at rapid rural urban migration. It was also another cause. It's also another cause, rather, because of the numbers of people moving to cities and towns. We also tend to find that the figures of unemployment in the urban areas will increase. And also, we can talk of um, other aspects like lack of skills can be a contributing factor. Right. Let's move on to the next question. That was number 253. We need to move on to 254. Provide a quote from the text which indicates the economic injustices that occur in Durban, Cape Town, and Johannesburg. Right. We go to our text. Our text here is saying experienced growing economic injustices, growing economic injustice due to persistent unemployment, poverty, and systematic inequality. That is where we get our quote. South Africa has experienced a growing economic injustices due to persistent unemployment, poverty, and systematic inequality. Then our next question is saying, suggest 3 ways in which the economic injustices in urban areas in South Africa can be remedied or resolved. Right, our major crisis is unemployment, poverty, and inequality. So we want to try to find ways of dealing with those problems. How can they be dealt with? How can they be addressed? So we look at aspects like job creation initiatives, the government must engage in job creation initiatives. For example, you can talk of the public works programs or the expanded public works programs. The expanded public works programs, the EPWP. That can be an initiative by the government to try and solve the injustice of unemployment by trying to create low skill jobs for the people who are unemployed. Then you can also look at equipping the people with education and skills. It's one key aspect that is very important. Some people are unemployed not because there are no jobs, but because they don't have the skills. So it's also a basic requirement that the government equips its people with the basic education and the skills which will make them employable. Then we can talk of social welfare payments. To address the problem of poverty and inequality, the government can try to improve the level of welfare through social welfare payments, through SASSA. And also what can be done, the government must put in place enhancing economic growth. Must put initiatives to ensure that the economy grows and productivity increases and more businesses expand their production, such that they employ more people. Right, that takes us to the end of the theory part. We move on to our map skills. We are looking at the map of Potchefstroom. It says Potchefstroom is an academic city in the northwest province of South Africa. It hosts the Potchefstroom campus, Northwest University. Right, that is map information. Right, we go to our questions. The contour interval on the topographic map. This is an ordinary question and it does not change. The contour interval on the topographic map, you find it here at the bottom of the map. It's written contour interval 20 meters, and in Afrikaans, it's also presented here. That is where you find your information. And for each and every topographic map that we are going to use is the same. It's 20 meters for all the topographic maps that we are going to use in geography, and it's 5 meters for the orthophoto map. So our response is 20 meters. Then we move on to our next question. The length of the bridge in block B5 in meters. Right, the length of the bridge, let's check on the map. In block B5, we want to ascertain the length of this block, of this bridge here. That's the bridge in B5. Right, if you want to calculate the length of that bridge, you measure the length using your ruler. You measure the length. From here, where the bridge starts to where the bridge ends. That's where you measure. And you find your measurement in centimeters. You multiply. You want your answer in meters by the map scale. Our map scale is 1 to 50,000. If you want to convert directly to meters, you multiply by 500 meters. So, according to this, if you measure accurately, you get 0.2 centimeters. You multiply that by 500. If you multiply 0.2 times 500, you get 100 meters. Right, so we are saying for this one, our measurement is 0.2, giving us 100 meters. Right. The true bearing from the benchmark in block A2 to trigonometrical beacon at F. Right, what you do there, if you want to ascertain your true bearing, you measure using your protractor. You identify your 2 points. Right, we are looking at these 2 points here from the benchmark in block A2. Right, our block A2 is here. And if you check where our benchmark is here. Right, and the other point is a trig beacon at F. Our trig beacon is here. So those are our 2 points. And what do you want to identify? You want to identify the bearing of the trig beacon from the benchmark. So what you need to do is we draw your north-south line here, parallel to your lines of longitude through the benchmark. We assume this is a straight line and it's parallel to our line of longitude, like that, using your ruler, drawing a straight line. And using that straight line, what you also need to do is from your straight line, you try to draw a more straighter one. Right, or let me just erase and try to draw a straight line. All right, what you need to do is you identify your point, and after identifying your point, you have to draw a straight north-south line, which is parallel to your line of longitude. Like, must draw a line which runs parallel to your line of longitude, like that, through your feature. And from your feature, you need to connect your 2 points. Connect your trig, your first point is the beacon, the benchmark, to the trig beacon down there. You draw another straight line connecting the 2 features. Ensure that your line is straight and it is connecting the 2 features. I'll assume this will be a straight line and will be connecting the 2 features. Right. I'm assuming this is a straight line and it's connecting the 2. Right, it must be straight. Then it means the angle that we want, this is our true north direction. If we want to find our bearing, we measure our bearing in a clockwise direction between the 2 points. So in a clockwise direction, it means we are going in this direction here. Automatically, this is a straight line from our north to our south. We know that a straight line is good 180 degrees. So we only need to measure the additional angle here. We add it to 180 to get the total angle. So if you measure it correctly, this additional angle is going to give you plus or minus 27 degrees. This additional angle between the south and the line connecting the 2 features. So it means you are now saying it's 180 degrees plus your 27, which is going to give you 207 degrees. That is basically how you determine your true bearing. Then the direction of the benchmark in block A2 to the trigonometrical station, we are saying what is the direction of this from this. This is our north, this is our west, this is our east, this is our south. So if we check the direction here, this is predominantly south of southwest, or generally to the southwest, but be specific, this is before the 45 angle. If it's 27, it means we are still in the zone of southwest. So our responses, we can safely conclude that our bearing is 207 degrees and our direction is south-southwest. Then calculate the area of the swimming pool at 5 on the orthophoto map. We go to our orthophoto map and try to ascertain what we are supposed to calculate there. And also we make the illustrations of the calculations that we are intended to partake. Right, coming to our topographic, our orthophoto map, our swimming pool is here at 5. That is where we are supposed to do our calculations. Right, this is the one dimension, this is the other dimension of the swimming pool. Right, we have to measure using your ruler and ascertain the length and also the breadth. And remember, our answer is required in meters. For the area, it means it is going to be in square meters. Right, so if you measure, my measurement for the length, it gave me 1 centimeter. And my measurement for the breadth, it gave me 0.6. So if you use these 2 figures, we are supposed to multiply it by the map scale, convert it to the meter measurement. We multiply, this is a scale of 1 to 10,000 on the orthophoto map. So we multiply by 100 to convert it directly to meters. And also we multiply this by 100 to convert it to meters. Right. So 1 times 100 gives us 100 meters. And 0.6 times 100, it gives us 60 meters. So these are our real measurements of the swimming pool. It measures 60 meters by 100 meters. So finding the area, we are now saying the area is now 100 meters times 60 meters. And this is going to give us 6,000 meters, square meters. So this is our area of the swimming pool, 6,000 square meters. If you measure correctly and convert correctly, you're supposed to get that response. Right. Let's move on to the next question. The swimming pool on the orthophoto map appears, is it smaller or bigger? Automatically it appears bigger on the orthophoto map because of the scale. Give the latitude of the symmetry at block G in B1. I'll just highlight how you're supposed to find it out. The symmetry in block B1. The symmetry is here. What you're supposed to do there, your longitude values are given. What you're supposed just to do is calculate your latitude values. Since you are provided with the longitude values, your longitude is 27, 03, 40, which means they are picked here, 27 degrees, and 03 is the first line where this symmetry is falling, and the longitude is 40 minutes, which means whatever measurement was taken from the edge of the map to the symmetry, it must give you a value of 40 minutes if you express it as a fraction of the total distance of the whole block. So what you need to do there is you need to measure the distance of this part of the block, and also you need to measure the distance from here to the symmetry. Then you ascertain which part of the symmetry was used out of the distances. For example, we are saying it must be 40 over 60 minutes of that particular distance that you measure here. Let's say, for example, it's 3.5 centimeters. If you measure that, it means whatever you get here is the point that was used to come out with the value of minute longitude for that particular part of the symmetry. Because remember, this is a wide area, so you need to pick a specific area which has a corresponding measurement from the line of longitude here to the symmetry. And you ascertain a point. Then you use the very same point. Let's say you have found out that is this particular point of the symmetry. Maybe it's this part, which means you're now using that point to calculate your value of latitude for the same point. You also measure the distance here and find out how long it is. Then you also measure from the top latitude to the point. Then you express the distance over the latitude distance or the width of the block. You multiply that by 60 seconds so that you get the value of latitude. And your latitude values are already provided for you. If you check here, your line of latitude is 26 and 39. So when you want to ascertain the value there, you already have your lines of latitude. Your longitude line is here. Remember, we use the northwest corner. Your longitude is here, 2903. We are on the same line. But here, for latitude, we must use this minute line. So if this is 2639, our values of latitude increase going to the south. As we go to the south, our lines of latitude, they increase in value. This degree value is not changing. It remains 26. But what changes is the minute. This was 39 to the south. The next one is going to be 40 to the south. Then you do your calculation to find the value of this particular point. After measuring the two extreme ends from the latitude, top latitude to the feature, and also after express it as a fraction of the whole width of the block, we multiply by 60. So according to my calculations, though they are not very, were not very precise, you must plus or minus get something like 26 degrees, and your minute value is 40, and plus or minus you must get 26 seconds to the south. That will depend with how you are going to measure and how accurate you are going to express your measurements. Right. Moving on to the next question. Potchefstroom can be classified as a Dutch settlement and a Dutch town. We are told on the map information here. Potchefstroom is an academic city. So coming here, if we are classifying it as a settlement according to the map that we are seeing here, this is our Potchefstroom. You are seeing the nature of the buildings. If you try to take one part here, which has been orthophotoed, you can see the nature of the buildings there. So can we say it's a dispersed, or can say it's a clustered? Then what kind of a particular city is it? Right, so it's a nucleated and it's a specialized. It's an academic. So it's a specialized. So it's item 1 and item 3. Right, moving on to the next question. Identify the land use in block A5 at H. Right, we're using the topographic map. We go to our map. We want to identify the area. At H, our H is there in block A5 to the extreme northeast corner. Right, our H is here. What is the land use here? We are referring to this area. We go to our key and check. The same thing is the same thing that we are seeing here. So, without wasting our time, the rural land use is cultivation. There is cultivated land there. Rather, we can say it's farming. Give evidence from the topographic map for the choice of the site. Why is it an ideal site for cultivation? Right, if you check here, why is this area ideal for farming? Right, you can argue that the area is flatland. There is a flatland there. And besides it having a flatland, we can also talk of communication of transport routes. Remember, farming need to be supported by transport. We need to transport the final product to the market, and also we need to get raw materials to the farm, and also we need to transport the labor. So a flatland and also the road network can be factors are promoting. And also we can say availability of water. We can see there is Potchefstroom Dam here, and there are some furrows coming from the dam and some reservoirs around the area, meaning to say they extract water from the Potchefstroom Dam here, possibly. Right. Moving on to the next question. The question is, identify the settlement pattern of Wagon Beach at I in block A4. This is the area. B4. What kind of settlement is that? We are seeing that there's a building here, there's another one here, there's another one there, and some other 3 or so here, some other there, something there. So from that look of things, we can safely conclude that that particular area, the pattern is dispersed. Or can say that is an isolated pattern. Explain how proximity or closeness to the markets is an advantage for the settlement. Wagon Beach. Why is it an advantage for it being close to the market? Right. If we check this area here, we can see there's cultivation taking place here, which means it's also a farming area. So if it's close to the market, what is the advantage of this area being close to the market? We can conclude that it's easy to sell perishables if they are producing some farm produce there, which are perishable. It becomes easy for them to sell perishable before they get bad. Because they are close to the market, they can easily access the market and sell perishable products from the cultivation to the market. And also, we can say it's an advantage because of reduced costs, reduced transport costs. The closer you are to the market, the cheaper it becomes to transport products to the market. So it's an advantage on their side that they save on transport costs. Right, let's go to the next question, number 2325. Refer to the orthophoto map, identify land use zones 6 and 7. Right, if we check on our map, we want to identify area 6 and 7. Area 6 on the orthophoto map is here, and area 7 is also around here. Right, so we are identifying our areas. Areas 6 and area 7. Area 7 is here. Right, so what has the land use, what are the question is saying, identify land use zones. This land use zone here, we are seeing that this is a built up area. So this is residential. That's the land use zone. And if you try to check this area, it looks like an industrial area. So the land use zone here is industrial. So that's the distinction. 7 is a residential, 6 is an industrial area. All right, then the next question, it says, give a reason for the location of land use zone 6. Give a reason for the location. Right, we go to the map and try to find out the reason. Why do we have industries located here? Right. One major reason is the accessibility to the national route here. I think you can see we have our end curve stretching along here. So, and also we have other linking roads into the industrial site. So it's easy access to the national route, the N12. That is why the industries are established in this particular space here. They can easily access the route N12. Remember, industrial activities, they rely on the supply of raw materials from somewhere far and also the supply of products to the market. So they need to link through major routes like that N12. Then also the area, if you check, there's one contour line here and the next contour line is there, meaning to say this area is a flat land, which is ideal for industrial development. So basically, if you check on those reasons from the map, we can justify that the area is ideal for industrial allocation. And also other factors like labor supply or the market. We can justify that this residential area is the supply of labor to the industries here, which is nearby. And also we can justify that it acts as a market for the products. So that those are also other qualifying factors that you can use. The next question is saying, give a reason for the construction. We've done that. We move on to GIS, which is our question 3.3. Define the term geographical information systems. But when we're defining this, we define it in very simple terms because it's a common term from grade 10. In grade 11, you are asked the same question. So in simple terms, just you can say it's a computer system which is used to do what? It's used for capturing data or storing or analysis or manipulation and all those uses of geographical data. So basically, when we're looking at GIS, we're looking at the application of computer technology into the study of geography to do all those pieces of geographical work like capturing data, storing the data, analyzing it, manipulating it when you want to change it. That is basically the GIS or the geographical information systems. Right, which GIS component were used to compile the topographic map? The components of GIS to compile the topographic maps. Under that one, there are so many aspects of GIS, the components. We need people to gather the data or to do the survey or the map. Or we can also look at hardware components like cameras being used to capture the information. Or we can also use software components to correct distortions on the map. So those are some of the components. Name the GIS source that was used to create the topographic map. They can use satellite imagery. Or we can talk of aerial photographs. Or also we can talk of the GPS, geographical positioning systems. Or we can also look at existing maps. We can use existing maps to add additional information on the changes on the geographical features and come out with the new map. Identify the types of GIS data depicted in the topographic map. The type of GIS data in the topographic map. The GIS data there is vector data. The topographic map is an example. The orthophoto map is an example of, right, this question is tricky because both the aspects are applicable to the orthophoto map. It is a spatial data and also it's a part of remote sensing. Topographic orthophoto map, the information is gathered through remote sensing, or we can say it's spatial data. But for the sake of this discussion, I want to use spatial data. And I want to justify why I'm saying it's spatial data. Right, for the reason being, why am I saying? Right, because it shows information related to geographical location. Because we know spatial data deals with the location of features. So on the orthophoto map, we see information there which is related to geographical location of features. And also it's a geo-referenced imagery. And you can also use it for spatial analysis. We can do spatial analysis on the orthophoto map. For example, what we were doing, measuring distance, or calculating the area of a given polygon feature. So we can justify that is a spatial data. But in another sense also, remote sensing is applicable because it was gathered, the information was gathered basically through remote sensing, through satellite imagery. So it's a matter of argument. Right, with that being said and done, this brings us to the end of our discussion on the paper 2 for the June examinations. I hope it is going to help you in preparing for the other coming examinations to follow. We meet again in other discussions. Your host in geography. Thank you for watching.